Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Wednesday, March 9th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Moore. The spring game is in 38 days, the Notre Dame game in 178 days, the game against Michigan in 262 days. The Ohio State football team kicked off spring practice yesterday on the indoor field at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Several interesting pieces of news came out of that practice. Tony Gerdeman and I talked about those on the episode of Buckeye Weekly that dropped on Tuesday, and we're going to have another one that comes out later today, so make sure you check out the Buckeye Weekly feed to get all of that information. Today, on this show, you're going to be hearing directly from Ohio State head coach Ryan Day on some of his thoughts on day one of spring ball. As always, these clips are courtesy of the Ohio State University Athletics Department. We're going to start with the wide receiver position. Brian Hartline has that room loaded with talent, but the challenge is how many of those guys can actually get on the field this fall? Are they open to going back to a 5 or 6 receiver rotation like they've had in the past?
Yeah, we've typically played 5 or 6, when you think back on when Terry was here and Paris, and Ben, Austin, KJ Hill, Johnny Dixon. We've typically rolled a lot of guys, and so, we like to do that, and really what you do is you try to find 1, then you try to find 2, and then you try to find 3, and then you try to find 4. And as many guys that deserve to get on the field and get reps are going to get reps, and we typically like to roll those guys if we can, but they have to get out there and earn that work. We have some really intelligent guys out there. I watched Cam Babb work out there, and he's learned a bunch of different positions. Same thing with Emeka. Julian's learned a bunch of different positions. So it's good that there's some versatility there, and we do have some decent depth out there. Some guys, even Xavier Johnson, Sam Wiglis, looking to see what Jalen Ballard can do. So some interesting guys this spring, and they're certainly going to get an opportunity to compete and just build. But this is just the start, and the way we look at it is, these 15 practices lead into preseason, and then preseason number 1 is that 16th practice, and we just keep building that body of work. So
that spring ball practice this week starts with 2 practices, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday before the team leaves for Ohio State's spring break. Now that sounds kind of weird. That's actually how they typically do this. They run a week of practice, then they break for spring break, and then they come back after that. So what are they actually doing this week before spring break?
Good start, but excited to go. We're going 2 days here. Then we go on spring break. And these 2 practices are a little bit more of an OTA style. And then when we come back off a break, then we start to dig into the practices. And so, but this is a great week for our guys on defense to kind of dig into that, to the O-line to start to, learn about some of the new techniques and ways that Coach Fry is going to be coaching those guys. So it's been a good week, but across the board, guys are going to get a lot of reps and look to improve, and the wide receiver position is certainly one of them.
The start of spring always means a lot of questions about guys coming back off injury, guys changing positions. Cade Stover fits into that second group. He has bounced around the field a ton during his career. He's listed as a tight end on the official spring roster, but it does not sound like that's where he's going to end up.
There could be. I think he's trying to figure out how he may fit into the scheme, and we've gone back and forth on that. He may come over to tight end and do a little bit of work there as we go. I think he's trying to figure that out still. Which side he wants to play. He certainly, I think, is wired to play defense. If you asked him what he'd like to do, it is defense. But he also wants to have a major impact on the team. And if it's on defense, then great. But I've always felt like, you want to allow the opportunity for guys to choose where they want to play, because that's when they put their whole heart into something. Like Steele Chambers made that move. That was his decision. And so I think he can be a tremendous tight end. I think he really put a lot of work in over the last year, and it's going to be up to him kind of what he feels most comfortable doing moving forward. Probably wouldn't put a deadline on it. Even he played all year at tight end, and then in the Rose Bowl played linebacker. So he's very, very talented, had an unbelievable offseason, was an Iron Buckeye for us in the Champions meeting yesterday. And, he's one way or another, he's going to have an impact on this team.
One of the big names coming off of a serious injury this spring is safety Josh Proctor. He is potentially in line to be the starter at the deep safety position. Jim Knowles calls that the adjuster position, by the way. So how much can Proctor actually do this spring?
Yeah, so he's going to start working his way back into some drills as we get back off of spring break. And I don't know if he'll be full by the end of the spring, but he's working through his rehab, and we're looking forward to getting him back into some drills as we, push in through the middle of spring.
One of the luxuries that Ohio State has this year that they did not in the previous season was the return of a starting quarterback. That, of course, is C.J. Stroud. So how much does it benefit this team, and how much more can they actually put on his plate in year 2 as compared to a year ago?
I think you just understand at this point last year he hadn't thrown a college pass, so now he's got a whole year under his belt, and then you're kind of learning what to do, and now you kind of learn why you do it, and just a little bit more of a deeper understanding of things. There's a little bit of a Rolodex of plays under his belt. We're going to look at some new concepts too, some things that he can handle, and maybe put a little bit more on his plate on the line of scrimmage and different things there. So, when you think about guys who played in the NFL for 15, 20 years at quarterback, this is just year 2, and it feels great. You feel like you have a guy who's been around for a long time, and certainly here, we've only had that one other time with Justin. So it is exciting going into the season, having somebody who's played a whole year under his belt.
And of course, behind CJ Stroud are the 2 most popular guys on any college football team, the backup quarterbacks. Those, in this case, are Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. So what did Ryan Day see out of those guys on day 1 of spring ball? You'll hear his answer on that, and then you'll hear a follow-up from our buddy Pat Murphy from Bucknuts.
Well, I was impressed with how Kyle came in today. I thought he had a good 7-on-7. He had a good approach, and kind of picked up from where he left off in the Rose Bowl practice, which was great. And then Devin, first day out here, again, I thought he handled it pretty good as well. For first day, there's a lot going on that first day. You're doing everything for the first time. So, the more reps that we can get these guys, the better they're going to be.
You finally have, returning CJ, but you have a backup who's played, unlike last year where it was maybe some scholarship guys, or non-scholarship guys that had seen some action elsewhere, but to have that luxury that you have a guy who can step in, who's been on the field, what does that mean as you head forward here?
Well, we haven't had that, right? We haven't had guys, we haven't had a starter who had any experience going into last year. So to have somebody who's actually been on the field and played in games and has a whole year under his belt, and that's a big deal because you can't substitute experience. And just being through a whole year, should pay dividends, and that should be, something that, we can use to our advantage. And, I think Kyle's had a good off season. So if he can kind of continue to grow as the spring goes on, that's huge for us.
One of the other notable changes in position on Tuesday during practice was that Mitchell Melton was working with the defensive ends. Now, he was a linebacker when he came to Ohio State, and then he missed all of last year with an injury. So is that going to be a permanent change for Melton to defensive end?
Well, we think that his skill set allows him to do a little bit of both, so we're going to kind of cross-train him in that area. But his size and his ability to rush, is going to give us some different things. And him being able to put his hand in the dirt, he'll work with Larry a little bit, then he'll go over with Jim and work some at linebacker. But we're going to try to do the best we can to have as many of those kind of hybrid guys to make the defense guess a little bit and not be as predictable with the front.
Someone else who is in a new position this year is Jim Knowles. He, of course, last year was the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. Now he's the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. And Ryan Day has actually talked about him as someone who is the head coach of the defense. Now, is that just a job title, or is that really a description of what Jim Knowles is doing at Ohio State right now?
Well, it's more just the philosophy of okay, you are in charge of everybody over there. And he's got a kind of a little bit of an army over there. He's got his coaches, then he's got the GAs, he's got the interns, he's got the quality control guys. I mean, he's got a whole group of guys over there. And when this thing's running well, then the defense coordinator is the head coach of that group, and he's great. He's been a head coach. He's done this before. He doesn't need a whole lot of direction, but he also understands that we have a culture here in place and a lot of pride in what we've done around here. So I think he jumped right in, bought into that, but also at the same time, taking this thing run, and you can see why he's had success. He's very organized, a very good communicator, and has a really good scheme.
Jim Knowles has a reputation not only as being a great coach, but also being incredibly smart as well. So could that, at least in theory, lead to overthinking things, maybe making things too complicated for players to pick up in the somewhat limited time that they have for meetings and on-field practice? Can you be too smart to be a coach? And if not, how do you avoid making things too complicated for players?
Well, I think he's very intelligent, and I love being around really smart football coaches. And really, when you talk about experience and doing things over time, you learn and you grow as time goes on, and you try to figure out what that balance is of, new things, whether it's special teams, offense or defense, or just doing the things that our guys know really, really well. And really good coaches can teach multiple things and scheme and plays and defenses and execute them at a high level. And that's really the work that is done during the offseason, so that when you get in season, you can pull back on that. And that's really what we're doing right now. It's about the training and the meetings and utilizing the time on the field during the walkthroughs and the individual drills. And to me, the average coaches are the ones that just kind of, let's just get the team and try to coach it off the film. And I think the really seasoned, good coaches do some of their best work in the meetings and walkthroughs and those type of settings.
You will get to hear a bunch from Jim Knowles himself a little later on in the week in one of the shows, probably, I'm guessing, Friday, but we'll figure it out. There's a bunch of stuff going on this week, obviously. So you'll get to hear a lot from Jim Knowles. You'll get to hear a lot from Kevin Wilson. We're going to be talking to the wide receivers and running backs a little later on this week. So there's all of a sudden a ton of great Ohio State football content coming right at you. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast if you are not already subscribed. Also, make sure you check out the Buckeye Weekly podcast. Donnie Gerdam and I have done a couple shows this week talking about the start of spring ball, some things we maybe took away from the first day, and much more. And make sure you check out all of our other great podcasts as well. The Big Me Kickoff podcast, Around the Oval with Alex Gleitman, and the Gives in the Bank podcast with Park Givler and Bill DeBankerain. They are all fantastic. Subscribe to them all wherever you're listening to this. We really appreciate it. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.